Well, thank you so much for joining us. As always, I really appreciate when you choose to spend your time with us. I know all of our time is valuable. It is one of those finite resources, and we always shoot to give you great value. And today, you are going to be glad you came on. We're going to be talking with Lisa Zeiderman about negotiating best outcomes in divorce through more holistic practices than the traditional way. So, welcome, Lisa. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Cindy.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the conversation. I've been on a mission for some time now, trying to get rid of those old school beat your chest kind of legal approaches. As an attorney myself for 30 years, I know it well, and it's a hard sell getting people to buy into a better model. And for our listeners, for those of you who don't know, Lisa Zeiderman, she's managing partner at Miller Zeiderman. She's a matrimonial attorney and a certified divorce financial analyst. She has awards coming out the wazoo. She's been named to the Crain's New York list of notable women attorneys. Hudson Valley Best Lawyer, a Best Family Law Attorney for Client Satisfaction by the American Institute of Family Law Attorneys, amongst other awards. We wouldn't have time to get to the content if I had to keep going on. And she is regularly published in Financial Advisor magazine, the New York Law Journal, and various other publications quoted on issues ranging from financial empowerment to tax issues to child custody. So definitely is coming to us with some serious chops. And I've got to ask, I mean, it's such a tough area of law, Lisa. What led you to this particular practice area?
So it's a little bit of a windy road, Cindy. I had actually graduated high school, went into the fashion business. I was
Ah,
I was really interested in being very entrepreneurial at the time. I guess I ended up being an entrepreneurial anyway because I obviously have my own law firm.
yeah.
But I decided to work on 7th Avenue, which I did. I worked for a manufacturer, well-known manufacturer at the time, and also worked at Macy's, which in New York was a very big
Of
department
course.
store.
Yeah.
And
Everybody knows
then
it.
decided that I wanted to actually have my own showroom. And so I went out and searched for young designers and put together my own showroom and worked with those young designers to market them and sell their goods throughout the country to major department stores and to
Wow.
specialty stores. And then I went through my own divorce.
Okay.
And in going through my own divorce, I really felt like I was super interested in the financial aspect of it, in the custody part of it, and also that I kind of understood what people were going through as they were going through a divorce, that they were really stressed at the time through financial situations, custody
Sure.
situations. I mean, what you're really there about at that point is probably the two most stressful areas that you're arguing about.
Yeah.
And what I also found is that I really was looking for an attorney who could be super responsive to my needs, who understood the case, who was well prepared when they went into court, and who even showed up on time.
Yeah.
And I didn't really find that person.
Yeah.
And so, in not finding that person, I thought to myself, I would really like to do this, and decided to go back and get my undergraduate degree at Fordham, which I did, and
Yeah.
to get my law degree at Fordham Law, which I did. And then I worked as an intern my last year of law school for a solo practitioner
Yeah.
and got into the courtroom and liked it and thought the negotiations are very much like the negotiations in the fashion industry. Instead of markdown money, we're talking about spousal support
Yeah.
and equitable distribution, but it's all a big negotiation
Yeah.
like everything else in life. And so I thought I could really do this. And then in 2013, I opened up my own practice, and it's now grown to about 50 people,
Wow.
20 plus attorneys, including an estates and trust department, and in both Manhattan and Kings County and Westchester and Rockland and Putnam
Yeah.
County. So we are really working with people with complex situations now.
That is wholly impressed. I clearly did not dig far enough when I was researching about you. I had no idea that it's like I already thought you were impressive, but that is just like taking it to another whole level. And what a sad commentary on our profession that you couldn't find that person. So now, more than most areas of law, I think, divorce can create, trauma. I don't want to overstate it, but I think that's a fair, characterization if it's not handled appropriately. And I know you advocate for a more holistic approach. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. So look, I don't think that as lawyers, we are equipped, nor can we respond to every single thing that goes on in someone's life. There are people who could do it much better than
Yeah.
we can. So we certainly know the law and we can be well prepared, but we need help. We
Yeah.
need people who can work with our clients, on therapeutic basis, people who can work on a financial basis to figure out, streams of income and complex issues such as valuation of businesses.
Yeah.
We often work with parent coordinators. We work with people who are really specialized in the area of therapy and who can help our clients through difficult times. It's a very anxious
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Absolutely.
clients have a lot of anxiety about it. It's stressful. Sometimes they're going to court, sometimes they're in depositions, sometimes they're just, in settlement negotiations. But in all of those things, they are really dealing with the most critical factors in their life. And so and let's just be real. This is while life is going on,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So, we've had clients who have had all sorts of health conditions as they go through that. And not surprisingly, you may be in a situation where you're in a weakened state. And so we've had clients who have had breast cancer. We have had clients who have children with special needs. We have clients who have autistic children. We have, all of this is just life. Putting aside the divorce,
Yeah.
there is a whole life out there too that would go on with or without the divorce. Sometimes there's issues of domestic violence that people
Yeah.
have to get through, failed pregnancies, fertility issues.
Yeah.
All of these things are part and parcel of the people who come to us. And so it's really important that we put together a team of people who can work with our clients. Sometimes people come and they already have their therapist. That's great. Otherwise, we have people that we can recommend because they've worked with our clients before and they're terrific and they've done they are able to work with them on therapeutic issues. And so it's really important.
Lisa, that is so beautiful and sadly so rare. So for our listeners out there, for the attorneys, I recommend you adopt this kind of approach. I think it is common sense, and what a better experience for clients. And for those of you who aren't lawyers who are listening, support lawyers who do this. Go actively. Obviously, if you're in Lisa's jurisdiction, check her out. And if you're outside her jurisdiction, be asking these questions so we start raising the bar, literally and figuratively. So thanks for that. What do you find are some of the mistakes that people make before asking for a divorce? I think everybody sort of jumps in or finds himself in that situation, and often a lot of damage is done. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think that people are very reactive. And sometimes they may be too reactive prior to finding their attorney or their therapist or figuring out that they shouldn't be so reactive. Look, it may be that there's infidelity. It may be that there is domestic violence. You could be in a situation where somebody wants out and you may not feel the same way.
Uh,
And so frustration, anger, all of those are emotions that may be appropriate emotions, but unfortunately, you're going to be in a situation where you really need to control your
Yeah.
emotions and act in a reasonable way. Plus, most importantly, in front of your children,
Yeah.
right? So I think that people often forget that when they're starting into this process, or somebody has started this process for them, right? The other spouse, the other
Yeah.
parent, whatever, that they are now being watched essentially, right? There is an expectation that they will rise to the best that they can be, when it's really such a difficult time to be the best you can be in the first place.
Yeah.
And now you have to rise to it, because there is, those text messages are going to get saved. Those conversations, depending upon what your what state you live in, may be
Yeah.
taped. Your angry reactions may be too angry and they may become scary. You may be involving your children in discussions that your children shouldn't be involved in, having arguments and fights and all sorts of things that nobody is going to think is appropriate. And yes, it's everyday life for a lot of people. And yes, it's human and we hear all of that. But the fact is that at some point, it may actually not be a good
Yeah.
thing and it may come back to haunt you.
Yeah. Great advice. And if you were going to do sort of a checklist, what kind of things should people be putting on there? And particularly, let's focus on the financial because you're right. I think it often gets ignored. People feel overwhelmed or ill-equipped. So, what kind of things should go on that divorce financial checklist, would you say?
So I would say start gathering your statements, your bank statements, brokerage account statements for the last 5 years, certainly. Tax returns, good to have the last 5 years of tax returns, credit card statements,
Yeah.
anything like that. That's really important to have. One of the things that's often overlooked, and you really need to start looking for it if you're going through a divorce, is if you've received an inheritance or if you received a gift from family.
Yeah.
Tracking and tracing that gift from family and where it ended up and how it ended up there and the paperwork that actually goes to it.
Yeah.
That's really important because then that may be your separate property and you may get a credit for that separate property. But if you can't trace it in New York, for example, you won't get it.
Yeah.
The other thing is premarital accounts. So premarital retirement accounts, premarital bank accounts, brokerage accounts, all of those accounts you may also get credit for if you are able to trace that money. Look, if it's spent, it's gone. Okay. Now, but if, for example, you took your premarital property and you put that into a home and you now own that home, or you've sold that home and now own a subsequent home, you may get credit for that premarital property. You just have to have the statements. So it's really important to remember that financial institutions only provide those statements for 7 years usually.
Mm,
And so it's important to save
yeah.
those statements that track and trace your separate property because they will be extremely useful.
Yeah.
Also, be careful not to commingle your separate property. I always say to people, separate property and marital property, in other words, the income you earn during the marriage and the monies that you might have come into during the marriage from inheritance or that you had
Yeah.
prior to the marriage, if you put them into a cup and you think of it as water and you can't tell the difference anymore, that's a
Yeah.
problem because you have done what is called commingling. And so really important to start thinking about those types of things.
And gosh, we don't. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm just going, oh, you probably saw me cringing physically here. I'm like, oh my gosh, like talk about it. When we're in the rosy phase, nobody ever thinks about those kinds of things or even tracking it at the very least, as you say. Now, I know you do a lot of work and talk about financial abuse as well. So for Elizabeth, what is financial abuse and what can we do about it?
So financial abuse is literally it's the same as any other type of abuse, except somebody is controlling you financially. They are literally not allowing you to move. So if I blocked you physically in a room, you would call that physical abuse,
Yeah.
right? Or emotional abuse.
Yeah.
But now I'm blocking you by not giving you access to any of the funds, for example, marital funds, funds to buy groceries, funds to actually pay for childcare. I may have changed all of the account numbers.
Yeah.
And so you can no longer see what we even have as a couple. I may have rerouted the mail so that the statements that used to come to the house or used to come to the emails, they no longer actually come anymore. And you literally cannot see. I might have cut off and I hate to use it, but your amount of money that you would receive every month from the person who was earning the money. So
Yeah.
perhaps there was somebody who was paying the primary part of the bills or giving you monies each month. Somebody would call it an allowance. I hate that word, but
Yeah.
it is sometimes used. And so maybe that's been cut down considerably over
Yeah.
time. Maybe it's down to almost nothing. And so your ability to move around the world, essentially, let alone around your town, is now diminished. You have no more ability to actually go out and even work.
Yeah.
And I always liken it to, there was a series on called Maid. I don't know if you ever saw
Oh, I
that.
did. Gosh, yeah.
Okay. So in Maid, what happened was she didn't even have the money for childcare, if you recall.
Yes.
And that woman couldn't even work because she couldn't afford childcare until
Yeah.
she finally figured that all out. And if you also recall, what happened was she would be physically abused too, because her spouse actually was then getting, drunk and intoxicated, and she had no choices. She couldn't leave. She couldn't even get a car, if you
Yeah.
recall. I think she ended up
Yeah.
borrowing a car from
Yeah.
somebody. So those are all signs of financial abuse, and they are very common, and they are also usually accompanied by physical abuse and or emotional
Yeah.
abuse.
Wow, gosh, you got my all unsettled here about it, but it's a conversation we need to be having. And I hope for our listeners that you're considering maybe people that you know who are in this situation as well. Make sure to share this episode, make sure to have those conversations. And as you're saying that, Lisa, it struck me, and you're sort of going off on a tangent here, but when people have exert that kind of control and try and exert that financial control, and and often some people may think, well, I've got a will, I know I'm at least protected in the long run, but that's easy to change without notice to the other party. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on irrevocable wills?
Well, I think that there are irrevocable trusts that can be set up.
Yeah,
I don't know that you could really set up an irrevocable will. You can set up certainly a trust that are irrevocable,
yeah,
and that would probably be more of my trust and estates department.
yeah,
That being said, okay, that being said, I think that you really can't count on something that you can't see tangibly, right? So
right.
if you're not seeing the assets, there's a very good chance that you don't have access to them because they either have been moved or you're not seeing them or
Yeah,
they're being kept from you. That person isn't going to be signing an irrevocable will for you.
yeah,
That right, or putting monies in an irrevocable trust for you, likely.
yeah,
They might be transferring monies to
yeah.
someone else, okay? And that is the more likely scenario, that monies get
Yeah,
transferred out to family members or friends or somebody else, and you wouldn't even know that. And that becomes part of the problem. And look, we've had a lot of clients whose spouses have put these trusts in front of them and said, let's give all the money to
yeah,
the children. And yes, I understand that there's tax reasons to do this, but there's also, you have to be so careful because there's also divorce planning and
yeah,
reasons to do that too. And so a lot of these trusts, you have to, and I understand the tax law is changing and that people are wanting to get monies out of their estate so that they don't get hit with heavy taxes. But at the same time, you need to make sure that you are actually provided for and that you're
yeah,
thinking, what happens if we run into a situation where we don't make it, where we are getting
yeah.
divorced? What happens? What is there for me to be able to live on?
Yeah. Well, and you maybe touched on, because I was thinking, what are your thoughts on prenups? And I think I know, given what you were just saying, but if you want to share that with our
So
listeners.
I'm a huge fan of prenups. I
Yeah,
mean, we literally probably just wrote 5 prenups this week already,
yeah,
and I'm very serious. I mean, we worked
yeah,
all weekend because people are getting married, in a week or two or
yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
is. But the bottom line is, I think that prenups buy you a lot of transparency, and I think that prenups also give you an idea of what the assets are.
yeah,
And so I think that they are incredibly important. And I think that if done correctly, they will alleviate a lot of issues later in terms of litigation, in terms of negotiation. And it's a roadmap. You have a
yeah.
roadmap of what's going to happen. What could be better than that?
Yeah. Yeah. I was very resistant, but I got to tell you now, after 30 years of practice, not in this area of law, but boy, prepared in advance when things are on good terms makes a lot of sense for this and any business, and for any business relationship in your personal life, just setting out, as you say, that transparency. And let's talk about mindset for a moment. I mean, people think I'm a broken record because I think that our first and most important negotiation is with ourselves on just about anything. So do you have any thoughts on how we can negotiate our mindset better, like for your clients, so that they can have a better experience when they're handling a divorce?
So I would say that people need to understand that it took them usually a long time to get to the point where they are, right? I mean, it may have been 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, right?
Yeah,
And that you're not going to get divorced overnight.
yeah,
It's just not the way it is. There needs to be enough information so that you understand what your rights are.
yeah,
And that is not going to come in a minute.
yeah,
And it's not going to come in a week or a month or probably even in two. And so I think that patience in this case is truly a virtue,
yeah,
and that you have to be realistic as to your expectations of it. I also think that you have to be careful not to over ask.
yeah,
Okay. You really want to be realistic
yeah,
about what your expectations are in terms of what your rights are. And your lawyer is going to know what your rights are. I mean,
yeah,
the lawyer is has had enough experience likely in the courtroom, knowing what a judge is going to do,
yeah,
knowing what the area calls for in terms of spousal maintenance, in terms of child support, a lot of that information. And so you need to follow the guidance of the person that you decided to hire, because that's why you've hired them.
Yeah.
And I think that you may have a different wish, but it may be an unrealistic ask. And so you're going to end up going down a road where you may be very, very disappointed. And when your lawyer is saying, I really think that this is it, you need to start to take that very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how can clients get like, how do you do? Because you have this very progressive approach, which I just love. How do you help your clients get leverage in their negotiations when the other person, whether their partner or frankly even the other counsel, either have or seem to have more power in the negotiation? Any thoughts on that?
So I think power comes with being prepared
Yeah.
and being calm and understanding what the facts are.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why you want to build your team out,
Yeah.
frankly, so that you have, the expert in the vocational area, the vocational analyst, so that you have the forensic accountant, so that you have a therapist to lean on when things become too tough and you feel so overwhelmed. I think
Yeah.
that's how you get that edge in negotiation is you feel super prepared, you feel level, you feel that you can enter a room and have that discussion calmly and be heard. And I
Yeah.
think you also have to make sure that you have an attorney who can be heard. If you feel that your attorney is not advocating for you, and that doesn't mean getting you everything you want,
Yeah.
but it means understanding the situation, and within the situation that the attorney is able to advocate for you in the best way possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I was smiling just because I'm a big advocate. When I talk about negotiation, it's one of my core principles. You can show up with the requisite confidence when you've done your preparation. And I think it ties back beautifully to what you were saying about patience. Do the prep work at the front end so that you're not scrambling or being surprised and then ending up in reactive mode and getting outcomes that don't make sense for either party and missing opportunities for more creativity. So important. I love that. No,
I also am going to add something, if you don't mind, Cindy. I think that for people who are the moneyed spouse, I think that they also have to understand that they're going to have to produce documents,
yeah,
lots of them.
yeah,
Okay, lots of them, many more than they ever imagined.
yeah,
And that if they produce them in an organized fashion and they don't fight the process,
yeah,
it will go faster, easier. You're not going to be in a situation likely, okay, where your spouse is going to walk away and know nothing. Why is that? Because their attorney can't do that.
yeah,
Their attorney really cannot let them walk away and know nothing, because it is their attorney's job to make sure that they understand what the assets are, what
yeah,
the liabilities are, and they're going to need documents. They're not going to take your word for it.
yeah.
They're going to need the documents.
Yeah, I love it. And it's getting that clarity. I mean, part of that prep process is having the clarity as well about what outcomes that you want at the end of the day as well. I often advocate that try and find the deep, why, not to get too corny about it, but of the other party in a negotiation, because it's amazed me in my career how often everybody always assumes it's just about the money, but it's not always about it. Some people just want to be acknowledged that they weren't treated well, frankly, or get that apology. What's been your experience about that? Is that something that you think has value?
So I think that, yes, I think that there is value in finding out what's important to the other person. So the other person, what may be important to them is that they have a relationship as a family,
Yeah.
that they still continue. And that doesn't mean that they all live together, but that they are still able to continue to have that relationship, that they can spend a birthday together, that they can spend a special occasion together, that they're able to walk their child down the aisle together, right? At a wedding. That may be the more important thing to somebody. And so it's important to understand what is important to each person in the negotiation.
Yeah.
What drives that person? It's also important to understand what's their stress point, right?
Yeah.
What's their pressure point?
Yeah.
Okay. You need to understand that. I mean, that's not necessarily the kindest approach, but that is the reality of it.
Yeah.
Everybody has a stress point.
Course. Yeah. And what role do you find that I mean, we've talked a lot about sort of the emotion and what people bring and how multi-layered this is. What role do you find emotion plays in these negotiations? And more importantly, how can we use it more effectively so that it doesn't derail the negotiation?
So I think emotion plays a huge
Yeah.
factor in these negotiations, right? There is this idea of win-lose, and I think you have to put that
Yeah.
win-lose aside.
Yes.
People are
Hallelujah.
literally, right. I'm like, I can't believe when we're discussing important issues that people want to figure out, are they winning or losing these
Yeah.
issues? Does it really matter as long as
Yeah.
you get what you need, whether you've won or lost a particular issue? So that's a very important thing to remember. This is
Yeah.
not about winning or losing. First of all, it is literally not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And you need to understand that. Okay. So each of these, points, okay, there may be some that you win, there may be some that you lose, I guess. We never call them losing because I don't
Yeah.
like to even think of myself as losing. I'm not a victim, so I never lose, okay?
I love
But
that.
I think, and I don't like if somebody actually thinks that they're losing, because that puts them in a victim way,
Yeah.
in a victim situation, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the question is, how do you get out of this? And I think the eye has to be always on what's the end game here?
Yeah.
What is the end game of what do I want to do? Look, divorces are expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no two ways about it. And I think people also have to be realistic about that,
Yeah.
because it is not an inexpensive process, but frankly, this is a financial partnership that you've entered into. Like it or not, that's what you did when you got married.
Yeah.
You entered into a partnership just like any other partnership.
Yeah.
And now we are literally breaking apart this financial partnership. And if we were breaking apart a business, you wouldn't think that it would be so easy. Like we would just do it in
Of
five
course.
seconds. It's going to be negotiation and working back and forth and figuring it out. And there's going to be some things that you give and some things that the other person gives, because that's what we're talking about here. It's
Yeah.
a financial partnership. That's what marriage is. And that's why it's so important to enter into that prenup, because that is your business contract.
Yeah. That's a great perspective shift. And I think a great way to manage expectations with clients as well, making that kind of metaphor for it. And what role have you found, if any, that creativity plays in these negotiations?
Oh, wow. I mean, being strategic, being creative is so important. Yesterday I was on the phone with a client for almost like back and forth almost the entire day until we
Wow.
got to a place where we both came out at the same place of what the next strategy should
Yeah.
be. So, listening to your client, making them part of the process,
Yeah.
understanding what they actually are bringing to the process, and listening to their ideas, it makes you as an attorney more
Yeah.
creative,
Yeah.
because in the morning I was like, no. In the afternoon I was still like it, no. And by the late
Yeah.
afternoon I was like, oh, I just thought of how we could do this, right?
Yeah.
And then we had like a plan, and it was all because we went back and forth on it so many times
Yeah.
that we came up with a plan.
Yeah. Well, and I love this for both sides, right? As the attorney, be more cognizant, be more aware, bring intentionality to that creativity process. And as the client, be demanding that of your attorney, frankly, be looking for and wanting that engagement to be able to find what all of the various options are so that you can get a little bit more creative and come up with strategies that might get you outcomes that are even better than what you'd originally thought, taking that more competitive win-lose kind of approach to the divorce. So I love that. Lisa, I'm wondering what's one of the most surprising things? I mean, you've been practicing a long time. You've got this obviously burgeoning practice here. What's one of the most surprising things that you've discovered in your years of practice in this area?
Oh, surprising. It's so hard to think of a surprise at this point. It really is. I
Nothing
don't think I'm
surprises you anymore.
I just feel like I'm not that surprised
Yeah.
anymore. I guess, I would say this. I think that people, when they come to us, and this was like a revelation that I had actually a few weeks ago, so it is actually pretty fresh. But when people come to you, they feel that they are so different from each other, and that is why they're getting divorced, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of the divorce, if you're very involved in the case and you're in negotiations, you start to see how similar
Yeah.
they really are.
Yeah.
And that there was a reason that they got married, and
Yeah.
a reason that they stayed together. And although there are differences, there are also so many similarities of what drew them together. And you could start to see those similarities
Yeah.
as you're getting really involved in the negotiations.
I love that awareness. And really, I mean, isn't that true of any conflict? We think of some of the biggest global conflicts we're seeing right now. If people would focus on where they're the same, they're all people who love their families and their partner. We're all had this human experience together, and in these conflicts we forget that we are more even most of the world religions, right? People have killed more people in the name of religion, and at their core there's such fundamental similarities. If we could just focus on that, what a different world it would be. And if you don't mind me asking, on a personal note, Lisa, I mean, especially practicing in an area of law that is so fraught, the clients, I imagine, are coming with so much emotion and that. What are some things that you do? I mean, you have this beautiful holistic practice, which I'm sure helps to a certain extent, but how do you sort of protect yourself from being battle worn, if you will, from the feeling like you've had the life sucked out of you and from the practice of law?
So look, it's funny. I always say to the attorneys who work with me, when they come into the office, they say, we have a problem. I'm thinking, we don't have a problem. We have done all the things that we have to do. We don't have a problem. So what is it that you're telling me? And they say, well, such and such and such. That's actually not our problem.
Yeah,
And that is the lesson, right?
yeah,
We are here to help with our clients' problems. But at the end of the day, we didn't create the problem.
yeah,
We are not the problem.
yeah,
We are here to help. It's like any other career, right? We're here. If I was a surgeon, I was a heart surgeon, I'd be trying to help you with your heart, right? If I was a lung surgeon, I'd be trying to cure whatever lung
yeah,
disease you have, right? That is what we do. We are here to help. And so I don't take on the problem as if it was my own.
yeah,
I think of it on a day-to-day basis as
of
if it's
course.
my own, like how would I figure it out and all of that, right? I when I'm negotiating the money, I think of it as my own, right? I try to
Yeah.
hang on to or not give or whatever it is that which side I'm
Yeah,
on, right? But the bottom line is that at the end of of all of it,
yeah.
it's not my life. I didn't create the problem, and I'm here to help, but I didn't bring all this on.
Yeah, that's a great life preserver to hang on to when it feels like you're in the rocky waters. I can't imagine. Well, Lisa, this has been such fabulous information. I love you've jam-packed it in. I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've had in your life? And this doesn't have to be about the practice of law at all, just one of those things that has you kind of go, aha, and show up differently or think differently.
So I would say that it is actually to do with the practice of law, but it's probably how I run my firm at this point. And that is that understanding that time and flexibility and making sure that you give that to the people who are working with you on all of these very difficult cases is really important. And that you are appreciative of what they are doing for both your firm and the clients that we serve. So I would say that that's a big mind shift. And I think that happened kind of during COVID because
Yeah,
I was very anti, taking time off and working
yeah,
from home and doing all of
yeah,
those things. And now I kind of I like that. And I think it's
yeah,
nice that my employees can see their kids during the day sometimes
yeah,
and their kids pop up on a screen or something as we're like,
yeah.
in a meeting or whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. And gosh, what a great lesson that is, because it so much of having a better life, negotiating our best life is about just being open to different perspectives that sometimes we close ourselves off from. So, and that certainly applies in divorce and well beyond. So where can people learn more about you, Lisa?
So they can go to lisazeiderman.com. I have a blog and I put on a lot of news and information, publishing, podcasts. Yours will be there. So it's a great place to learn about me. I am on LinkedIn. They just go to Lisa Zeiderman. And of course, they can actually email me at lz@mzw-law.com.
Beautiful. Well, again, I can't thank you enough. You've been so generous and transparent and shared some incredible insights. I think for whether it's for our lawyers listening or prospective clients listening, I think everybody got a lot of value. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for our listeners out there, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done that. And as always, I encourage give the gift of sharing. All right, there are some beautiful perspective shifts here that I make such a difference. And imagine what a better world it would be if we all start maybe even incorporating just a little bit of this. So definitely go out and share what you've got here. And before we sign off today, as always, some ways we can work together if you are looking to up-level your negotiation skills because you recognize that all of life is a negotiation. I've got everything from online to group to my signature VIP or mastermind experiences. Help you improve your leverage, your skills to get more of what you want and deserve in life. And if that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book if you haven't done that as well, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. And that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.